Good evening, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the original Xbox, an area that I have not delved into. In fact, this is probably the most modern console I've covered on this channel. Even though I usually talk about earlier stuff like the second generation, the NES, the Sega Genesis, stuff like that, I actually really like modern games, and the Xbox, it's actually starting to become retro, actually, like more on the older side. Actually about 20 years old this year, I believe. But the Xbox is one of my favorite consoles, maybe in like the top 5 or around that area. There's a lot of great games on it, but it's actually become relatively obscure over the years. It's probably the cheapest console to collect during this generation. And that's honestly a damn shame, because third-party games were best on the Xbox. It was the most powerful system of the time, and there's a bunch of exclusive games, and there's a great variety of third-party games as well, and like I said, they were best on the Xbox. And yeah, that'll be the topic of today's video: Xbox exclusive games, or games that were made for the Xbox. Some of them may have come out on PC. Just Xbox games that are worth, buying an Xbox, like Halo. That's the obvious one. And yeah, let's get the obvious out of the way here. Halo 1 and Halo 2 are, well, the most famous games on the system, and they're also very solid games. Yeah, no surprise there. Halo 1 is pretty decent. I don't think it's amazing. I think it's held up well comparatively to single stick shooters. This is actually one of the first shooters to use the twin stick method, which one is to move, one is to look. So that's a pretty decent game, but the second one is where things really hit the sweet spot. Halo 2, it's like Bill Gates' little fetus, the one that he didn't abort anyway, like Mech Assault or Project Gotham Racing, Fable. Man, they ditched a lot of franchises, actually. Halo 2 is a great game, actually, really solid game. But when you bring in multiplayer, it just becomes fantastic. A must-play game. Must-play multiplayer game. Single player, it's still a great experience. It does get a little bit repetitive, but I did end up beating it, so obviously it was worth my time to finish it, and it's probably worth yours. Great shooter, but let's move on to the more obscure Xbox games. I wouldn't call Fable a obscure game by any means, but for example, Xbox One fans or Xbox Series X fans probably won't know what Fable is unless they're familiar with the original Xbox or the 360, because, like I said before, this game got abandoned, this franchise got abandoned. But what we did get were great games. I played the first one. It's a really solid RPG. I mean, the characters don't get a lot. They're not really fleshed out. They're not great characters, but it makes up with it with the combat. The combat, there's a whole bunch of different spells you can use, weapons, armor. You can get pussy. Hell yeah, you hook up with a woman.
Well done.
Very solid game. Again, I think the characters could have used a little bit of development, but the combat really makes up with this game. I mean, the combat makes the game. Such a fun combat system. Gotta love how you're little Timmy running around your town trying to do chores to get a birthday present for your sister, and then your town gets burned down by pirates. God damn, when I first played this game, I'm like, holy shit, what a fucking 180. You didn't really see that stuff back in the PS1 era or something. This was truly the next generation where things started to get really mature. Start seeing violent themes. But yeah, Fable, I think it took about 15 hours to beat the game. I'm not entirely sure, but it was worth those 15 hours to finish. And I definitely recommend you pick it up and play through. Now, this isn't an Xbox exclusive, but I had to give a mention to the Simpsons Road Rage. This game has mixed opinions on it, probably because there's not a whole lot of in-depth gameplay. It's a Crazy Taxi clone, actually. But what you get there, what the gameplay you get is, well, it's crazy fun. There's a whole bunch of different characters you can play as from The Simpsons. I used to like The Simpsons as a kid, but I don't really watch it anymore, so I'm not really familiar with a lot of the characters. I don't have that personal touch with them, but even though I'm not as much as a Simpsons fan anymore, I really like this game. Just a small little pick up and play game. It's a lot different than having to invest hours into a long RPG or first person shooter. It doesn't soak up a lot of time. It's something where you can play it for like a half hour to an hour, put it down, come back to it a week later, and continue doing that as long as you want. So, The Simpsons Road Rage, it had to get a mention even though it's not an exclusive, just because it's a lot different than what this era became, which is very long games which require a lot of investment. I already talked about Fable, but arguably even better is Jade Empire by Bioware. And the reason this might be better than Fable is because even though you don't get these crazy powers, and you don't upgrade your abilities really, well, you kind of do, but not in the same sense. What this game does have is character development. The characters are likable. I haven't played this game to completion yet. I guess I really need to find a time to invest into it, maybe the summer. But I played about 5 hours. The characters, they're likable. The combat is very solid. Maybe not as good as Fable's, but still very good. So I'd say this game is actually a little bit better than Fable. There's this weird part where the game just turns into a fucking shoot 'em up. That caught me way off guard. I was just playing it casually. I'm like, holy shit, just a shoot 'em up out of nowhere, just out your asshole? Okay. It wasn't very fun. It was extremely limited. But I had to mention that because that caught me off guard. What the hell? Jade Empire is probably the best RPG you can get on the Xbox, so it goes without saying, you might want to grab this one. Maybe. Maybe. If you're looking for a fast-paced action game, the best of the best in terms of combat system is Ninja Gaiden Black. This game is incredibly addicting despite its difficulty. You can play through it for a few hours even though you're getting your ass handed to. It's so much fun. I mean, in terms of a combat system, this may be the best combat system I've ever seen in a game. It is fantastic. There's a ton of different moves. It's almost like a beat 'em up, but the enemies are relentless, so you need to be thinking on your feet. You can't go brain dead like a typical beat 'em up where you just smack them and they just sit there and take it. You gotta be on guard. You gotta block. You gotta roll. You gotta use your projectile weapons. Well, okay, maybe not that, but it requires a lot of thinking, a lot of reflex. This game is a masterpiece, probably my favorite on the Xbox, just because of the gameplay. The gameplay is so good. I know the NES games get a lot of attention, but this one is just as good. This is really just how Ninja Gaiden was supposed to be in 3D. It also took a mature tone, so you'll be decapitating enemies, blood everywhere, killing people as they scream in agony, kind of shit. Definitely a lot of fun. Probably the best game on this list. Must play. The last game I'm going to mention here is Crimson Skies. It's a game that I'm actually still currently playing through at the moment. I'm about 3 hours in, and wow, this game really just surprised me. I kind of got the urge to revisit it again, or to try and give it another shot after I played Steel Empire for the Sega Genesis. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. Yeah, this game blew me away. I mean, I guess the first time I played it I was kind of tired, so I guess I should have just continued playing it anyway instead of put it back in the backlog. But yeah, that's a damn shame I didn't play this game through earlier because it is a very solid game. It's a 3D flight combat, kind of arcade style, which is what I like. It's not a terribly long game as far as I'm aware. It also takes place in alternate history, which I really like. I like me some history. I'm a history guy. I'm a little bit disappointed that it didn't take place in BC 5000 because I can't relate to the people in 1930. They're not Neanderthals. Well, there I mentioned a few Xbox games which I think make it as good as the PS2 and the GameCube. there's a lot more exclusives and a lot more games that I didn't mention. Of course, the Sega games are the big ones. There's a lot of Sega games, so much that people call this the Dreamcast 2.0. But honestly, why is the Xbox underrated? After all, it had all those Sega games. Sega's pretty cool. It had all those exclusives I mentioned, not just Halo. Well, for one, it didn't really sell well. And two, I think a lot of people who are into Xbox are moving on because, Xbox is still around and they're still making games. But a lot of the Xbox franchises now, well, they're not the same as what they were. There's a lot more franchises during the original Xbox. Bill Gates, and his team were pumping out a bunch of different variety of genres and exclusive games, and then they got aborted. But yeah, if you haven't checked out the original Xbox, I really recommend it. It's one of my favorite systems. Like I said, third-party games were best on here, and a bunch of exclusives. I really think this could compete with the GameCube and the PS2 if you gave it a shot. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. See ya!
You can put that old stick away. We'll begin training with real weapons now. Get used to the weight of this sword, and let's see if you can hit Whisper with it.